Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Burrow and I'm extremely excited once again today as we're going to be continuing in our series, My Story, My Words. And we're going to let one very special person today, his name is Mike Young. He's going to be sharing his story with us. Now, the impressive thing about Mike right out of the gate, and there's much more to be impressed with than this, but one of the most impressive things that I found in Mike is basically simply he is a 27-year, that's right, a 27-year heart transplant recipient survivor. So I'm just excited to be able to hear his story, hear how he's made it this far, and kind of hopefully toward the end of this, allow him to give us some tips, maybe some tools that we can use to try to make it that far in our transplant journey as well. So welcome to the program today, Mike. Why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Jim. So my name is Mike Young. I'm from Los Angeles, California, born and raised. It's basically myself, my sister, who's a year older than me, and my mom and dad. Okay. And I got diagnosed with cardiomyopathy when I was around 1 year old. And cardiomyopathy for me was never really a big issue. I just kind of thought most people had heart conditions. I mean, as a kid, I just didn't understand it. And it never played a big part, because I had a mild cardiomyopathy, but it was something they always kept track of. I used to have to go see my cardiologist once a year at Children's Hospital LA, and I never had a biopsy. I think they did want to do a biopsy when I was around 5, but my mom said no because it really wasn't something that I desperately needed. And it just, I lived a basically normal life. I played baseball. I played a few sports, never any contact sports because of the cardiomyopathy. Mm-hmm. But overall, I grew up, we went to Catholic school and played sports and as normal as you can, child, in LA.
Right. Okay. Well, I grew up, of course, I was congenital as well, but I had a defect repaired when I was 6 months old. So I got a little bit different start than you did. Sounds like you were able to do even better, but I did grow up with some of those same restrictions. I could have played baseball if I'd been worth a flip, but I wasn't. So contact sports were out. And so I kind of know that. And I felt a little bit like you. Outside of going to the cardiology appointments every year, I don't know that I felt any differently. Now, I felt winded often, I think, looking back, but I don't know that I felt all that differently. I just, like you say, you thought everybody went to the cardiologist and everybody did the same thing, right?
Yeah. I did feel winded a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but I would get tired quicker. And that was something that, looking back, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I just didn't really get it at the time.
Yeah. Well, when would you say that you started having any issue? I know you've gone up through a certain age, but how old are you before you really started noticing any type of issues?
Right when I graduated junior high school. So I was 14, and it was like a week before I started high school. And I just, for me, what they told me was when I hit puberty, I sprouted up a lot, and my heart couldn't keep up with my body.
Okay.
So I went from just graduating high school, junior high.
Yeah.
And, we were having fun, me and my friends. Like, I remember with one of my friends, we went to the lake. We were riding jet skis all weekend. And like the week before I started high school, I noticed something in my body that I was just getting sick and getting, and what was it? Yeah, like the first week I started high school, like it was a small private school that I went to in Burbank, and it was there was 2 stories. Mm-hmm. So I remember one of the first times I really realized it was I had to go upstairs for my first period or second period. Oh. And I was just exhausted, just walking up the stairs and going to the classroom. That just started the whole, my mom was taking me to emergency rooms, to specialists. I was being told I have everything in the kitchen sink. I had hepatitis, I had ABC, I had mononucleosis, I had liver disease, and every time we would go, we always told him I had a cardiomyopathy, and there were times where they're like, "Oh, we're going to work up all these tests," and then it was always, "Oh, you're fine, you could go home."
Oh, okay.
"Oh, you're fine, you could go home." And finally, I did go to the ER at Glendale Bennett Hospital, and they kept me. They found out that it was my heart, and this is 1995, I believe, 94, 95. And my mom, well, I guess they told my mom I needed a heart transplant. And again, 94,
Wow.
who heard about the heart transplant? And my mom was able to get my cardiologist since I was a kid to come to Glendale, Venice, and tell me that I needed a heart transplant.
Okay. Well, backing up a little bit, I know that a lot of times we are in general, or the public is in general, we're worried about them missing some weird unknown disease or weird, virus or something. But in this case, it was really right before their eyes. It could have been, not hindsight's 20/20, but it could have been the most obvious potential, I guess, that it was something to do with your heart. But yet they kind of were moving past that, I guess. I won't say blow it off, but they were kind of moving past that every time, right?
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
I know my mom did bring it up to the hospital after, like, what took so long to find it? When you guys, one of the first times we went to the ER doctor was like, "Oh, we're going to look into this. We're going to do all the heart tests."
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was just like, "No, you're fine. You go home."
Mm.
But,
Well, you already mentioned, they have mentioned the word transplant to your mother, and you were saying then that she got your pediatric cardiologist come and talk with you about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know how it kind of is at times for one doctor to go to another hospital that they're not, I guess, working at, and she would only let my cardiologist from when I was a kid tell me.
Go mom.
And yeah, she was my biggest as a kid. So it was devastating, but a little easier hearing it from him.
Yeah. Well, she made a good choice on that. How did the process develop from that point then? Once you first hear the word associated with your name, as I say, how did that process develop?
It happened pretty fast from what I remember. I was at Glendale, Venice for about a week, maybe 10 days. I don't remember exactly anymore. And it was, I think, like a day after he told me, they transferred me to Children's Hospital LA.
Okay.
And then I was in their ICU waiting for about 6 months, little over 6 months.
Do you remember anything about the evaluation? I know it's probably evolved over time, but do you remember that process? Were there very specific testing they were doing at that point? Do you recall?
I'll be honest, I never realized that there was an evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like they just said you needed one, and fairly soon after I was on the transplant list, from my understanding.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what was happening behind the scenes, but they, I was in the ICU and tons of testing, but I didn't realize that. Like now, I know that there's how the evaluation process is.
Yeah.
It just seemed like it was something that was life threatening, and because the day I went to the hospital, I couldn't walk from my front door to the car, which was only like 25 feet.
And you're 14, 15 years old, if I got the age about right?
Yeah, I was 14.
Oh. Yeah, that'd be devastating.
Or 15.
Devastating to not be able to move any better than that. Like you say, caught your attention when everybody's going upstairs and you're not. But that's certainly a huge sign if you're having trouble moving from your own house.
Yeah, within a month, my whole energy was just drained out of me, and that was, of course, my heart's not pumping properly. So, but at the time you feel mentally, you feel you could do things, and you really couldn't.
Oh, yeah. I outdid myself all the way into the end. I've told a little bit of the story. I'll shorten it up real quick. But when I was going through my transplant evaluation, one of them, I was actually evaluated 4 times, but one of those evaluations I was going through, I went in that day absolutely convinced that I was going to prove to them I did not need a heart transplant. And I literally ran on the treadmill. I thought I ran all day. I ran like less than a couple of minutes, but I ran on the treadmill until it shot me off the back physically. I went off the back, passed out. They had to pull me up, throw me on a table, and they didn't revive me necessarily, but they had to get me to pay attention to them again. And because you want to prove that you're Superman or Superboy or whatever at the time, that you can do anything.
Always. Yeah, one of the biggest, like this is what's happening to you moment. When I was in the hospital, I was probably at Children's for about a couple weeks, and I had to use the restroom. So we're in the ICU. It's very small, and I think my dad was in the room. Somebody else, I don't remember, and the nurse was a tiny little lady, young lady, and I was like, I got to use the restroom, and then I was gonna try to get up real quick. I put my legs over the bed, and then the nurse, I remember her specifically saying, "Hold on, let me help you." And of course, in my head, I'm like, I can get up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need help standing up. I went to stand up, and I immediately hit the floor. I couldn't even stand up. And, that's never happened before. Like, who wouldn't think they couldn't just stand up? Because it's the simplest task.
Yeah.
But when you're that sick, it's not,
Yeah. Oh, definitely no. That's something that a lot of people watching or listening to this completely do understand. They do understand that, hey, this is, as I tell people, it's unfortunate, but this has to get really bad before it gets better. And in your case, it's getting bad. Now, you were actually, as you remember it and recall it, then you get in the hospital, you were listed fairly quickly. How long did you end up waiting on that list?
I waited for, I think, about 6 months. Okay. I know there were times where I got delisted because I either had an infection or something was going on. Mm-hmm. I actually had an LVAD. I had the first LVAD at my hospital, at Children's Hospital LA. Because I was older and tall. I'm fairly tall for my age, not extremely tall, but fairly tall. And I was able to, back then, it was, I think, the HeartMate. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty big device. Oh yeah. But because of my height and everything, I was able to have it. They were doing it at USC. Right. And my cardiologist, my surgeon, Dr. Starnes, he was the one that was doing them over there. And they're like, the only thing that's basically going to keep you alive long enough to get a transplant is if we put this device in you. Mm. And they did it. And, I waited about 3 months without it. And I waited about 3 months with it on. Just under 3 months. Right. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. Well, let me ask you this. Did you stay inpatient the whole time, though, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I was inpatient the whole time.
Yeah. The LVAD back in those days, and it's not a lot different now, unfortunately. We talked a little bit before we got on the call about technology needing to advance. That's one area it could advance. But especially back then, you were blessed, and at the time, a lot of times they would make you, for lack of better terms, or require you to heal after an LVAD would have been even longer than the 3-month period. So you were very blessed that your call came when it did, and that you were actually able physically to receive that call. That's great.
Yeah, the crazy thing was my LVAD actually internally bled twice. So I had about a month after I had it, I guess one of the stitches that was connected to the heart, it kind of like came loose or something. and I was internally bleeding, and it was, I'll never forget that day. I wasn't feeling good that night. I finally went to sleep. I woke up and everybody was in my room. And the surgeon came in, and he was he's a very well-known surgeon. And a lot of people, like, he's just in charge. Like, he's the guy that runs that whole area.
Yeah.
And I guess he got a big fat syringe, put it in my stomach, sucked it out, and it was filled with blood. And then they took me into the OR. And I remember just seeing, like, the tube filling up with blood, and I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Oh, I couldn't imagine. I'm not very fearful of blood. You know, we kind of get over that if we are, but man, I couldn't imagine seeing that, especially at your age and in your situation, because it's just your whole life is unknown right then. Everything about it's unknown to you.
Oh yeah. But I'll be honest. One of the best things with me is I have faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe my doctors are top notch. They've shown it, proved it over and over. And I just never thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
I totally understood how sick well, maybe not at the time, but I did know how sick I was. But I just had faith that I was always going to survive this.
Yeah. Well, I completely understand that, the faith in God mainly, but I also, looking back, I had moments where I got nervous, but I'm like you. A lot of people ask me, they'll try to ask me at least, they'll say, well, how did it feel to be, on the brink of death? I never felt on the brink of death, honestly. I felt terrible sometimes, and I knew the risk. I mean, I was very aware. Growing up similar to you, except for to a little bit more extent, being congenital and growing up with issues, I was very aware of the possibilities. And of course, I was older I wasn't transplanted until I was 38, so that being different too. But I just wasn't afraid on a day-to-day basis. I never got to an end of the day and said, boy, I'm glad I made it through that one. I just assumed I would, I guess.
Right. Same with me.
Well, tell me about your, you get the call. Tell me a little bit about that day. Who all was there? What was the feeling in the room when you finally got the call? Because you're inpatient, so I know how it came out. Somebody walked in and told you, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I did notice that they were coming in a little bit more frequent it was in the middle of the night. So I don't remember the time or anything, but I do remember them coming in, like, connecting me with morphine. And I think I went back to sleep, and I woke up, and my mom came in the room. And then she looked at me and said, Michael, the call came. And I think I was transplanted that morning.
Yeah.
So it was, even now, like, I think it's a longer process.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it took. I don't know how long the hospital knew before they told us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They checked. Like most transplant patients, we've had calls. Or I don't think they told us, but they went to look at hearts and they declined them. I know that happened a couple times, but never that we got the call and then it got turned down.
Yeah. I think the process, and I'm just looking through hindsight because I wasn't with you 27 years ago, but I think the process has changed a little bit. I think it has, that could have been an anomaly for one thing, but also I think that the process has gotten a little bit more complicated with all the involvement. You've got the local hospital making a choice. You've got the local OPOs making a choice. You've got, of course, the UNOS, United Network of Organ Sharing, got a hand in this. There's a lot of red tape, I think, that's involved in that. Also, so much of it now has to do with the fact that we are blessed that sometimes our organs can come from other areas of the country, like mine did. Mine came from Oklahoma. And so there's some time delay in that. You have a family on the other end making a decision. Of course, you got the actual transport of it, or at least as all doctors like to do, they like to put eyes on that organ and check it for themselves. So maybe the process has gotten quite a bit longer, and that's for good, I believe. But maybe it's gotten longer than it was then.
Yeah, it definitely seems longer. Definitely seems, it's different. I've known since I was transplanted, just the way they, we were 1A or 1B or whatever. Even that has changed, I think, like 3 times since, 2 to 3 times since I was transplanted.
Yeah. I was on the tail end of the 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B system, and then they moved to this 1 through 7 straight numbering system, which not a fan of. But anyway, they did change it up a little bit. It's gotten difficult, but so you get the call. Obviously, you go into surgery. How did it feel for you? What you can remember about waking up? How did your recovery kind of begin?
Well, it wasn't my first surgery, so that was good. And well, back then, it was just a longer process. Well, the longer process, like now, I've had we'll mention it later, but I've had recent surgeries, and back then they kept you on like the ventilator longer. They kept you. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, they still wanted you to get up as soon as you can, but now they get you up, they get you moving. It's just a better, faster process now.
Yeah.
And just being on a ventilator for a couple of days sucks. I think one of the surgeries I was on for like 5 days, and oh man, it's rough.
Yeah. When we were going through the worst of COVID, that's one of the things that I knew that it just, I don't know how to actually explain it. It concerned me that so many people were needing those ventilators, and I get the good that potentially did, and all that, and the opportunity that gave people. Of course, there are people alive today because of that, but at the same time, that ventilator is hard. That thing is hard to be on. It's not only hard emotionally if you're aware at all, but it's definitely hard on the body. It's a very, very difficult thing to go through.
Yeah, it's not something I would ever want to go through. And it's, how do you say it? But like the one of the biggest things too about after my transplant, I felt so much better so fast. Like it felt like I got a battery put in me because I was so sick, and that's another thing where I had to learn, like I couldn't do what I thought I could do with my head.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally did leave the hospital, we went to, my family and my friends, they got like a limo.
I like it.
I left in a limo. Yeah. And, we ended up going to Universal City Walk for one of the things. And I remember just walking halfway down and back to the limo. My legs, my shins were killing me.
Yeah.
Because I was in the hospital for 6 months. I wasn't walking that much.
Yeah.
So, but, I did get better fairly fast, and, like we're no rejection.
Yeah.
And no early rejection. And, it was just learning the process, going to a lot of the appointments. And one thing I did learn was when you're a patient in the ICU, like I look at transplant now, like in steps. When you get told you need a transplant, it's you learn this whole process.
Yeah.
And immediately you get the call and you become somebody who's post-transplant, or not, like you've had a transplant.
Yeah.
And now, like you kind of like close that chapter before you, and now you're in this chapter. And then once you like survive the initial few months of transplant, now you're just learning to live with it.
Yeah, the surgery itself, in hindsight, is a blink in it.
Yeah.
Not to take it lightly by any means, but it's just a blink in time, because that wait time for some people is extremely long, very grueling, can be extremely difficult. And then comes the surgery, and then once they get over that hump of it, they've got a whole lifetime to live, and you got to get set for that for that third phase, I guess you call it. So your recovery in the last 27 years, summarize that. You seem like you did well once you got home. You just had to relearn yourself and obviously get some muscle tone back in the rest of your body. But how has it been for those 27 years?
Honestly, I look at it as amazing. So I ended up finishing that first, because I got sick in ninth grade. Mm-hmm. And I had homeschool and everything. And then in 10th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th, I went to high school. I went to like the local high school. And I just, was ready to enjoy life. When a lot of times when you're in high school, you want to ditch or you want to do different things. And I was just glad to be around kids again.
Oh, yeah. And,
enjoying the experience. I didn't play sports again, but I remember I think my senior year, I wanted to try out for baseball, and I went with one of my friends, and I saw them throwing the ball, and I was like, man, if I get hit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I walked away.
Yeah. You have to view things a little bit differently then, which now for that particular thing, I won't call his name, but we've actually got a mutual friend in the transplant world that plays semi-pro professional baseball and does great at it. I'm glad. His story is he collapsed on the field. Is how he ended up headed for transplant, and now he's back on. So I'm thankful for that. But at the time, I can see your anxiety about jumping back in on that.
No, I said it was still kind of new. Like years later, I would have done it. Yeah. But being so new and being like, man, like my chest is delicate, like, and for the LVAD, my scars from the top of my neck to the bottom of my belly button. Yeah. So it wasn't, it wasn't just like the upper scar. Yeah. And I didn't really, I had my gallbladder taken out about a year later. I had gallstones. And that was like one of the first times I was really back in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And back then, especially, like if you had a bad infection or something, you would go in the hospital and they would take care of, I had such great care at Children's. What I had a really when I was about 22, 23, I had a really bad sinus infection. And it lasted about a year. And like I would get antibiotics and it would feel like it went away, but it never fully went away. It just kept getting stronger. And then finally I went to the sinus people and they're like, yeah, you should probably have sinus surgery to get everything out. And I had the sinus surgery, was so different, but another experience. And I felt great after I got everything out of me. And then I basically had like 10 years, maybe longer, where nothing really happened. I mean, I think I got shingles a couple times. I had shingles twice, and just very minor things. And it wasn't until about, and I when I say like I enjoyed, like I had a great 20s. And, but the longer you live, like, something happens. Yeah. I did have my tricuspid valve replaced about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. At my job, I was riding a golf cart and somebody lifted something that I crashed into. Oh. And about a little bit after that, like I started getting like faint at times, but I never like passed out. And they did find out that my tricuspid valve was malfunctioning. And then the conversation came back up, like, should we wait for another transplant? How long are you going to be able to live with this? And it got worse. I don't know if it got worse, but they did say, like, we recommend to replace the tricuspid valve.
Right. Well, I had a similar situation, my aortic valve, in that, and I didn't know this until a few weeks after surgery, but the day and night of my transplant surgery, they actually found my donor's heart had a problem with its aortic valve. They found that. They knew that. And the doctor had to make a quick decision in the ER, while they had it out of a body, do we repair this now and take a chance on wasting time, or do we go ahead and get it in him and get it going and we'll evaluate later? Well, they chose the latter. And so I got a heart with a damaged aortic valve in it. They knew that. They knew that going in. And then they did similar to what you're talking about. They debated for the next few years over whether or not to make an attempt to replace that, and which ultimately did get it replaced, and that was easier than I thought. But they had to make a decision on whether or not to even try, because they said one day he may need another transplant. We just don't want to keep opening it up unnecessarily. And so maybe he can live with it as it is.
Yeah, mine was just a few months where they were debating. And that was the time when it was just coming up on my anniversary. This was happening where, or are we going to wait for another transplant? Are we going to have surgery? Which was very scary at the time, because I haven't had heart surgery in like 18 years. Having the surgery, or that's when I started really sharing my experiences.
Yeah.
Again, and I told myself I'm just going to be as transparent as possible. And with social media, I just, I posted some old videos of when I was on the news. Ever since then, I really became, again, outspoken advocate for organ donation.
Well, tell me a little bit about, I think you've got something going on right now that's really, I think is and it'll continue to become more and more tremendous in our world. Tell me a little bit about what you've got going on, the Young at Heart Foundation. How do you name that?
Yeah, it's called the Young at Heart Foundation. Mike Young at Heart.
I like it.
And we spoke. I had cancer during COVID. Thankfully, because of my doctors, they found it so early. I didn't have to have chemo or radiation. I had 2 surgeries. I had kidney cancer. So the first surgery was on my left kidney. The second surgery was on my right kidney. I healed, fairly well after. And, thankfully, I'm cancer-free right now. But during that time, COVID was rough, where I did lose a couple family members.
Yeah.
And one of my best friends had cancer also. Like, she found out she had cancer a week after I did. After that, I told myself, I've been wanting to do something for a while. And I kind of had a good idea of what it was, not exactly. And I told myself, like, I'm not going to keep procrastinating. It's going to happen. And I hired somebody to help me do all the paperwork. I booked a location, and we just ran with the foundation. The Young at Heart Foundation is for kids waiting for transplant.
Okay.
It's basically 3 parts. It's a kids, mostly, foundation. So at the moment, we're only working with Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. And they're referring as patients, because that's that's the hospital I have the best relationship with.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, we talk with usually the parents first, depending on the age of the children. We talk with the parents, and at that point, I just tell them, like, look, I had my transplant at Children's, just like you guys are waiting right now. I'm this far out. Today I'm 42 years old. I was 15, I think 15,
yeah,
when I had my transplant. Like, do you have any questions for me, or like how is the process going?
Well, I know that's a tremendous encouragement to a parent when you walk in and they can see a person, see someone having lived through this, having been there, and I call it doing that. We don't ever want to say done, but having been there and doing that, that's got to be a tremendous encouragement to them. And for you especially at this point to be able to say, I've got 27 years under my belt. That's got to be huge as far as motivating them, letting them see the other side of this and letting them see the opportunities that may lie ahead for even their child.
Yeah. And that's the thing I noticed the most is, just giving hope.
Yeah.
And and the connection, like and so the other part of it is being somebody who was in the hospital for 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it was like when I got a letter, when I got something that kind of, it didn't take you out of there, but it's just kind of like, had a good, just remember it, something memorable. Yeah. So we're making gift boxes for the kids. And each gift box is individually made for each patient. So during the process where we're getting to know the child and the family, just say, I'm a Yankee fan. I like the New York Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I'm more of a baseball fan. I like Star Wars. So we would make a box that would, put something that's Star Wars, Yankees, if we can, and each box is just, individually made for each patient.
Being able to personalize it, then that definitely, I can see that definitely brightening someone's day. That you I don't know if you have form to fill out or if you just snoop around real good, probably a combination of both, and you gather that information, and then that's definitely good to be able to personalize those boxes.
Yeah, so one of the hard parts too last year, because we're on our second year right now
mm-hmm.
as a foundation. One of our hard parts last year was having our website done properly, which took months, months and months.
Yeah.
Our goal is in the future to be able to have hope kits throughout the country. We're learning that a lot of the necessity is gift cards.
Mm-hmm.
Some are just like, a couple fast food and Starbucks, but gas cards are needed so much more. Some of these families that we're working with, they don't live close to the hospital. They live about an hour away. And when you live an hour away and gas is in LA, $5 a gallon, it makes it very hard for some families to see their kids.
Well, I was able to see the pictures you posted of that, and it was definite in the family's eyes that already the immediate impact that you're having on them. And I know that is a tremendous help. And there's a lot of burden that people don't always calculate, unless you've been there, done that. People don't always calculate. There's a lot of burden that comes in on the family, sometimes financially, being able to keep up with the basics or the necessities, even while they're there around the hospital to visit, the food, whatever. I know you're helping with that a lot. Now, tell us, how can we help? I'm fine. If you give a box to Los Angeles, I'm going to smile just as big as if you gave to someone in New York or Alabama or wherever else. So how can we help you with that?
Yeah, right now, this year we're really about growing and getting the word out about what we're doing. This is a tremendous help, just having more people learn about what we're doing, and we could funding. Funding is always, for any foundation, is such a necessity. Where you could go to our website, check out what we're doing. We're going to upload some more pictures in the next couple of weeks because we've done some other things since the last time we updated it. But there's places to donate. You could also right now sponsor a Hope Kit. So the Hope Kits that we're doing right now are about $300 because we're not mailing them out. It'll be a little bit more once we have to start mailing them out.
Right.
But right now we're trying to keep them up $300.
Well, you want to reach as many people as you can, and so that's a way to do that. And you can build into anything eventually. I hope that you will.
Right.
So we can go to your website. I'll put links beneath this video in different places for that. And then I guess we can pray for and encourage you in what you're doing, because it's tremendous to me. Already, even as in the beginnings that it is, just there at Children's, that's tremendous. It makes a huge impact. You've been there. I've been there. Whether you're a kid or an adult in the hospital, sometimes, especially for a longer period of time, can be very, very trying. And not just for you, but for your family. So I know you're making a tremendous impact on them. So thank you for doing that, Mike. I got one more question for you, and then I'll let you go here. What advice, it's backing up to your experience, your 27 years, what advice would you give someone right now who is either waiting for transplant or shortly out of transplant? What kind of advice would you give them for a very productive quality of life?
The best advice I could give is, number one, you got to be as diligent as possible, and it's the most important thing is your medication. Mm-hmm. Taking them at the right times and never not taking it. And you might mess up one day or two.
Yeah.
So be it. Take it, get back on track.
Like today, I'm just now realizing mine's laying over here. I'm going to shake it around. It's empty because I didn't fill it up. I didn't take it. I got to get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, and it happens. But, you gotta not procrastinate on it, like not let it go. Like, you know what I mean? It's the most important thing, your medication. Number two is try to as best as you can have a good relationship with your hospital and with your team. Let them know. Like there were times where I probably didn't have to call my coordinator for 3 years.
Yeah.
But make sure to always go to your appointments. Do your best to not ever try to cancel your appointment.
Yeah.
Just that's your priority in life.
Yeah.
Or, and it's not really a big deal. Like for me, I go every 3 months. They're ready to push me back to every 6 months, and I said, no, I have insurance. I'm going to be seen as much as I can. I think that's one of the reasons why they found the cancer so soon.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Sometimes you're like, you know what? I could be seen further out because you're doing better. As a transplant patient, we never know when something's just going to little things turn into big things.
Yeah.
You got to be on top of that stuff. And I think a positive attitude, if you stay negative, that festers and it's not healthy. Oh, and you can't always be positive. I totally get that. I'm not always the most positive person, but the longer we live, I never thought I would be out this long, but man, do I want to have another 20, 30 years?
Yes. Well, I think that's great advice. And I like to, some people around me a little bit more know this more than others, but I love to alliterate things. And so I'm going to say, here's what Mike said. He said, follow your prescriptions, get to know your people, be persistent with your appointments, and then be positive in your attitude. That's the 4 P's of Mike for today. And I appreciate that a whole lot. It's been great talking to you. Great to hear a little bit about your story, and I'm sure there's more that we could share, but I think we've touched some of the highlights, and I'm so thankful for the foundation that you're working with and for, the young at heart. I think that's not only catchy to say it, but I think you're doing and going to continue to do great things. So again, everyone, link in the description below, so you can go to his website, check him out. He'd probably welcome you on Facebook if you found him on there. If you're somewhat related to the transplant world, he'd like to get to know you a little bit. And I look forward to the great things you're going to do, Mike.
Thank you so much, Jim. And our Instagram, that's kind of where I share the most right now.
Okay.
Day to day. So I'll give you the link for the Instagram and then of course the website. And
okay.
I do have a small YouTube channel that a lot of me rambling.
Yeah, you've done a good job on the Facebook posts and different things I've seen, so I look forward to even more of that. But everybody, thank you so much for joining me today on My Story, My Words. Of course, the Transplant Helper as well. And so, Mike, you have been in around my programs enough to know we're going to tell people to do what here at the end. They're going to do what? Stay
stronger.
Good to talk to you today.